Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be talking about what to do if you get stuck during the college application essay writing process. So some students get stuck at the very beginning because they don't know how to brainstorm, they don't know what to write about, they don't even really know what colleges are looking for, and that can make the process even more intimidating. Other times, students have a draft and they get stuck because they don't know how to make it better, they feel like they have the right story, but maybe the execution isn't so good. So we're going to talk about some tips today that will help you with that as well. So if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to my channel because I'm going to be doing several college application videos and I would hate for you to miss that kind of content, especially if you're about to be a senior. Oftentimes when students are stuck on what to write about for a personal narrative, it can be really helpful if students make a list of all the things that make them unique and special, all the things that have shaped their worldview, basically a list of all the things that they want colleges to know about them. And so this list can get quite long. It can feel quite awkward as you're writing it, but that's okay. Just trust the process. And I would even recommend that if you're stuck on this, that you have friends and family kind of weigh in and tell you what they think makes you unique and add their responses to your list as well, because sometimes we're so harsh on ourselves, or when we're stressed, we just draw a blank. And so sometimes it takes hearing what other people think makes us special in order to actually realize what stories we have to tell. So once you have this list, the next step is to put an R next to anything that is on your resume and an RL next to anything that is more appropriate in a recommendation letter. Now, it's okay if you put an R and an RL next to something. That's totally fine. This is just kind of a mock-up right now. This isn't anything super official. So what you do after that is you look at all the things that are sort of unclassified, all the things on your list that don't have an R or an RL next to it, and see if you can take those things and kind of categorize them. See if any of them go together. Do any of them have a common theme, a common story, that kind of thing? Because what you want to do is look at these things and figure out what is the story here. Because these things were clearly important enough to who you are that you want to figure out, okay, how can I take these and turn them into a story? Because these are the things that I want a college to know about me, but yet they're nowhere else in my application. So this next tip has some exceptions, but generally speaking, you don't want to repeat information in your essay that is elsewhere in your application. Now, I'm not saying this to stress you out, but hear me out on this. You want to make sure that you're putting forward a complete picture of who you are. Think about each part of the application as a puzzle piece. In my opinion, the personal narrative is the biggest puzzle piece because it's the time when you get to talk about yourself in your own voice, and it's a time where you can talk about things that aren't anywhere else on your application. So what you want to try to avoid is appearing one-dimensional. So let me give you an example of this. Let's say that a student has won the science fair. That's going to be on their resume. And let's say the student then had the science teacher that was in charge of the science fair write their recommendation letter. And in that recommendation letter, they talk about how the student won the science fair. By that point, the admissions counselors will know that you've won the science fair. So if you are that student, you probably don't want to write about the science fair in your personal narrative because it's already been established that you won the science fair. So instead, think about other things that make you who you are. And so you want your narrative to be connected to the whole picture. So you don't want it to seem like it's totally random, but at the same time, you don't want to tell them what you've already told them in other places. So generally speaking, try not to use your narrative as a way to repeat info. If it's been on your resume or if it's brought up in your recommendation letters, then it's been brought up enough. And so use the essay as a means of telling a different story about yourself. Another reason that students sometimes feel stuck when they go to apply for colleges is that they realize that they need different essays for different colleges, but they kind of are doing it piece by piece and it feels like the process is never ending. And so that can be really stressful mentally because it feels like you don't know when the process is going to be over. And sometimes it feels like you've already written this essay for somebody else and you're not really sure what to do. So one way to sort of prevent this, and it does add more legwork to the beginning, is to try to collect your prompts in advance. I recommend making a spreadsheet and writing down all the schools that you intend to apply to. You need to figure out if they're a Common App school, because if they are, then the benefit to that is that you write one essay that you submit to multiple colleges, but not every school accepts the Common App. However, a lot of the prompts are very similar. So as you make this spreadsheet, you might realize that even though you're applying to 10 different schools and you're going to need, let's say, 4 different essays, a lot of the essays might have similarities, and so you might need to tweak your essay, but you might still be able to use the same central idea, and that's a whole lot easier to know at the beginning as opposed to just starting to apply to different colleges and realizing that you have like 4 different essays that you have to write and you try to start over every single time. So one way to kind of help save your sanity a little bit during the long run process is to collect your prompts at the very beginning. And this could also help you feel like you're more in control. And I think when students feel like they're in control, then they tend to write better. Whereas if you're writing in this frenzy because you're stressed out, then you might not be putting forth your best work. Another thing that sometimes helps students is looking at examples. So let's say that you have your idea, but you're not really sure how to write the essay, or maybe you're just not even sure what to write about or how to write about it. Looking at examples can be really helpful. And so 2 of the major sources of essays right now, as far as inspiration, are just like doing a Google search for essays or going to YouTube. And I think there's benefits to both. So when I have my students read personal narratives that have been posted online, I ask them to be like an admissions counselor. And I think this is a useful tip for students as well. So as you're listening to someone's YouTube video, think about what stands out to you. Is it the topic? Is it the way they presented the information? Is it the descriptive writing? Is it how they connected different things? What makes that essay stand out? Now, one thing I will tell you, though, is that you don't want to get into the habit of comparing yourself too harshly, because if this is your draft, then don't compare your draft to someone else's finished product. So use it as inspiration, but don't use it as something that's going to like belittle yourself. Don't use it to be like, oh man, I'm not going to be good enough. I'm never going to get in. So try to like have a healthy perspective as you approach looking at examples, because I think looking at examples is a really good way to help you kind of gain perspective on different approaches. Another thing is you should not plagiarize. And I feel like that should go without saying, but it happens a lot. And so it's really important not to start your college career with a big issue of academic dishonesty. It's okay to seek inspiration from other people, but it's not okay to take their work and use it as your own. So just keep that in mind as you're looking for examples. Do you like the content matter that they chose? Do you like their style? What techniques can you use in your own way? Not what techniques can you steal from them and try to like pass off as your own. Sometimes students get stuck after they've already written the draft and they know that the idea that they have is what they want to talk about, but they're not really sure how to fix the execution. So if that's the case, then one thing I recommend is to think about your starting point, because the college application essays are relatively short. They might not feel short as you're writing them, but in general, the narrative itself is not super long, and so you want to dive right in a lot of cases. Now, there are times where buildup is appropriate, but for the most part, because of how brief the narrative is, oftentimes students that don't really like the execution of their essay don't really like the pacing. And so there have been a few times where I've read students' essays and I've gotten to like the 3rd paragraph, and that's when I was interested. And so I told them, cut these first 2 paragraphs and start here. And it totally changed the pace of their essay. So sometimes the starting point is off, and so it just takes maybe cutting some of it or tweaking it, that kind of thing. Like you really want an impactful opening. And so if you're struggling with this, you might actually have a teacher or a trusted family member or friend look at your essay as well, because they can kind of look at it hopefully somewhat objectively and tell you what's going on with the flow and what parts interest them. It's also helpful sometimes to have someone who doesn't know you super well read your essays, because you want to make sure that you're giving enough context to where if they don't know you, it still makes sense. So starting points are big because you want your essay to be interesting from start to finish. And so if you're starting like before all the action, then sometimes it takes too long to get into the action and you don't want to lose your reader from the beginning. So one tip I have if you feel like you're stuck is to think of a really impactful opening. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope this was helpful. Please remember that if you are doing a college application essay, to give yourself a little bit of grace and give yourself time to make revisions, but make sure that your voice shines through. I think sometimes people obsess over these essays, and I totally get why. But at the same time, you don't want to burn out too quickly because you want to enjoy your senior year. So I hope these tips are helpful if you're stuck and you're not sure where to begin or you're not sure what to do midway through. I hope these tips will be of use to you. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up and please don't forget to subscribe because I'm going to be doing several other college application videos and you don't want to miss that. All right, guys, until next time, happy writing.